Hello, everyone. Thanks for the organizers for the invitation. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So this talk is about the drive chains and side chains. And it is called a Drivechain BIP, enabling the opcode contacts to add Bitcoin drive chain functionality. So I will explain to you what a drive chain is, what a side chain is, and why this is a very interesting path for Bitcoin for creating innovation in this blockchain. So some words, few words about me. I've been in the space since 2010 approximately. I've been doing security audits and security hardening in the Bitcoin code since then, and also I co-founded several companies in this space, like CoinFabric, Wayne Loans, CoinSpect, and the project I'm full-time now working. It's the RSK, also called the Rootstock sidechain, which is a sidechain to Bitcoin that has been active since January this year. So these are some of the vulnerabilities I found in Bitcoin, and the one in yellow is the one that Kenzo mentioned today in his talk yesterday's morning. So we want this innovation to continue on Bitcoin, and that's why we are building Bitcoin here. But the more radical ideas, the more interesting ideas, maybe it's very difficult to implement on Bitcoin. Modifying Bitcoin has been compared to repairing a plane in mid-flight, okay? So we want to be very, very conservative in the changes we make. And so a lot of ideas like confidential transactions, faster confirmations, or maybe having more higher space on chain, or having these stateful smart contracts will probably never, ever get into the Bitcoin blockchain. And we probably had to accept this. So Bitcoin has become a real store of value of not only of all cryptocurrencies now. So if we want to create this real innovation, have very interesting ideas, where do we put these transactions, these new transactions that we want to invent? So we have these three possibilities. We can create an overlay protocol like Counterparty and store this new transaction information in op-return, opcodes. And you can also create extension blocks, which is a very interesting proposal which matches blocks with some additional block space, which only a subset of the miners will understand, and will soft fork to add this new capability. Well, these two proposals have problems. One of the problems is that it preserves the 10-minute block interval of Bitcoin. So if you want to do some faster blockchains, you can't. But also, it introduces some incentives for miners to, in particular in extension blocks, to transfer these extension blocks along the Bitcoin blocks. So at the end, you are actually creating bigger Bitcoin blocks. So if you see the debate we had for the increase on Bitcoin block size, when extension blocks will probably bring the same debate again and again. So the last way we can extend Bitcoin, which is the one that implies less changes into Bitcoin, is to have parallel blockchains that are pegged one-to-one to Bitcoin. And this is now called side chains. I will explain more about this. So once we have the medium where we are going to transfer, to have these transactions, we have to decide who is going to be in custody or locking these funds that will move between the main chain and the side chain. Okay, so there are three possibilities here. One is have some kind of consensus enforced locks or escrow. So basically, one blockchain should understand the consensus of the other blockchain, so it can understand if the other blockchain has locked the funds. by receiving a small proof, something called an SPV proof, that these funds have actually been locked in the other blockchain. So then they can be unlocked in the secondary or in the sidechain, and vice versa. And this is what the original Blockstream paper it was about, SPV sidechains. Then, of course, we can have a federation, okay? These are a group of notaries, each one of them storing a private key that it's part of a multi-signature, and then all the funds that are transferred to the sidechain are locked in this multi-signature, and the federation has to act unlocking these funds by signing these transactions. And the third one, and I think is the most interesting one, is where the miners have the ability to unlock these funds. And this is what has been called a drive chain, or now it's called hash rate escrow. So basically, the miners are listening to the consensus system of this sidechain. And when this sidechain says, okay, we have to release these funds, they start an on-chain signaling process where the transaction will be finally released, the withdrawal transaction. I will explain more about this. And also we can have hybrids, okay? We can mix a federation with a hash rate escrow, or we can combine a SPV sidechain to a hash rate escrow to have more levels of security, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the RSK blockchain so you understand what are the problems we face and why we are pushing for this drive chain solution on top of Bitcoin. So this is the RSK ecosystem. So basically, we built on Bitcoin as a store of value, and our sidechain is much faster and has stateful smart contracts. So all the business logic you can build on top of RSK, and we are building and we are bringing to this blockchain and into this sidechain a lot of additional services. So this is how it looks like. So what are the main properties of the RSK sidechain? So first of all, it uses Bitcoin as its native currency. So of course, we call these smart Bitcoins to differentiate between Bitcoins that live in the Bitcoin network and blockchain and Bitcoins that have been moved into the RSK blockchain. So there is no new speculative token in RSK. Then it provides stateful smart contracts and 15 seconds target block time. Currently, the RSK network is being merge mined with the Bitcoin network, and we have more than 20% of the Bitcoin's hashing power. Okay, so this actually makes us the second most mined cryptocurrency, even if we don't get into the charts. And as I said, we have a one-to-one peg to the Bitcoin cryptocurrency, having this escrow. And we are using a global federation. This global federation, it's made of exchanges and other top security companies in this ecosystem. And each one of them is having one share, one private key that is part of a multi-signature. So in order to increase the security, we'll soon be deploying hardware security modules for the federation. So the key is even more protected from them. And another interesting thing is that the whole process of funds withdrawal is controlled by a smart contract on the platform. So basically, the federators are blind. They just receive orders from a smart contract that is executed in the blockchain. And when this breach smart contract tells them to sign, they sign. And then they broadcast this transaction on the Bitcoin network. So they have no other coordination system apart from listening to the blockchain and responding to the blockchain. And the last thing is that by using our hardware security modules, we can create more intelligent hardware security modules that can only sign certain types of transactions, like transactions having time locks or covenants. So we can add more layers of security for the withdrawal process. So this is how a classical SPV sidechain would look like, the process from moving coins from one chain to another. So first, we have a command in one chain that says, okay, let's log some funds and unlock them on the other chain. We have some confirmation period, so we can build an SPV proof. Then this SPB proof is taken to the sidechain, and generally in the sidechain we have a reorganization period where a counter proof can come and claim some other thing. And when that is over, the Bitcoins are unlocked. And the same process can be done in reverse. The problem with this is that it's very easy for us to do a SPB proof sidechain on the RSK side because we already have the smart contract capability. But on the Bitcoin side, we don't have any of this capability to understand the consensus on the blockchain and the transactions from a second blockchain. So if you see the Elements projects, they have an implementation of an SPB sidechain that could eventually get into Bitcoin, but in that case, it would only understand blockchains that have the same transaction format and the same block format as Bitcoin. So it's not that you can, do it for anything. Oh, also the same hashing function. So it's very restricted what you can say. You can do. Sorry. And this is what RSK looks like. So in the direction from Bitcoin to RSK, we have the same SPB sidechain. So we have a smart contract that receives an SPB proof and will release the funds if the SPB proof has enough number of confirmations. But on the other side, because the funds have been transferred to a special Exodus address that belongs to the Federation will have to sign this transaction. And what we want in the future is to implement this Drivechain after the Federation have signed, so we not only have the security of the Federation, but the security of the Bitcoin miners, and I will explain this in a moment. So how this Drivechain or hashed escrow works. So we have two miners. These two miners are watching the sidechain. They are interested in supporting this sidechain, so they are watching every block. And when they receive the command from this smart contract, it says, release funds using this transaction. That's generated by the sidechain itself. So what they have to do, they only have to signal this in the Bitcoin blockchain, but adding to a Bitcoin block a very short tag, a very short signal, which is basically the hash, the transaction ID. And when the second miner that is interested in this sidechain also sees that this command has been produced in the sidechain, it will again signal this information in a Bitcoin block. And the transaction is built in such a way that when enough number of signals is added to Bitcoin blocks, it will enable that transaction to be valid in the Bitcoin blockchain, okay? So basically, at certain point when enough number of signals have been collected, then the transaction can go into the Bitcoin blockchain. So where do we store this information on the Bitcoin block, and how do we signal? Well, we store information in the Coinbase script. The Coinbase script is a field in the Bitcoin block that has about 100 bytes that can be used for anything, and only the miner can write in that field. So we basically create a tag, which is the acknowledge tag, and then acknowledge list comes. The acknowledge list is composed by several acknowledge lists from the different sidechains the miner is supporting. So a miner can support any number of sidechains. And for each sidechain, there is an acknowledge list. And an acknowledge is just the ID of the transaction. And that's all that has to be stored in this block. So we have some compression mechanisms that in order to be able to refer to a certain transaction with the lowest number of bytes possible, we use the shortest possible prefix to refer to this hash. So that makes this very, very efficient. So this is an example of 4 blocks that have been tagged. The first block says that the XNet, there is a proposal of a transaction, and this is what is shown there is a pre-image of the transaction ID. This is to prevent denial of service attacks. I will tell you more about it later if you have time. But the actual transaction ID is the one that is below, that is OXBAA501. That's the transaction ID. So the next block has this tag that is said, okay, for the sidechain XNet, signal a positive acknowledge for this transaction. So it only has to write the OXBA, the byte BA in this field, and that's enough to signal to make a positive signal. In the next one, we have a miner that has not signaled anything, which that means to signal to create negative acknowledgements for any proposal. So it's very easy to just say, okay, nothing what is being proposed is valid, nothing what is being proposed is authentic. So the cost of denial of service attack is very high because of this. And in the last one, we have that to acknowledge for two different sidechains. In one is a complete negative acknowledge. We just say, okay, I'm listening to this sidechain, there is nothing here. And the other is an example positive acknowledge. Of course, all this data is not written in ASCII, it's written in some very optimized binary format. So it's very few bytes are actually needed. So how can, from the script, count or make sure there are enough number of signals? Well, there is this new opcode, which is soft forked. It's called count acknowledge, which receives 5 arguments. So the first argument is provided by the script sig. It's the poll start block number. So it is when the poll has started. The second is the sidechain ID. So this ties that transaction to a specific sidechain. The third one is the acknowledge period. This can be up to 2 days. So this is the time the miners will be signaling for the acknowledging this state, this withdrawal. The next one is the delay period, and this is very important. And this is something that was added in this BIP and was not present in the previous BIP. This is up to a 90 days period where the transaction is approved, but it's not valid to be included in the blockchain. So during those 90 days, up to 90 days, the community can do anything if they detect that the majority of miners are trying to push some malicious withdrawal. They can eventually soft fork Bitcoin to prevent that transaction to ever hitting the blockchain. Okay, but this is just an extreme case. So the existence of this delay is enough of that deterrent, to not try to do any malicious signaling. Okay, and the last argument is the liveness period, which means how many blocks that transaction will be valid in the Bitcoin blockchain after this delay period is over. And what is interesting about this is that all these arguments, except the first, of course, all the last 4 arguments are provided by the sidechain designer. So I want to have this security model where withdrawals are fast. I don't care much of anything. Then I can put very low values for the delay. But I want to have maximum security. I can put 90 days of delay. So what the opcode returns, it returns just 2 values: the positive acknowledge count and the negative acknowledge count, and those 2 values are pushed into the Bitcoin stack, the Bitcoin virtual machine stack. So this is a simple example of how it works. This is a script pub. Generally, this would not be part of a script pub, but would be coded in a pay-to script hash or pay-to-witness script hash. But in this example, to make it simple, I put it in the script pub. So you see the 4 first parameters are the sidechain ID, the acknowledge period, the delay period, the liveness period, and then the opcode that counts. And then you use the actual existing Bitcoin opcodes for arithmetic operations just to code whatever function, whatever computation you want to do with these values. For instance, in this example, it checks that there are more positive acknowledges than negative acknowledges, and it checks that that difference is more than 51% of the total blocks that you are polling. So whatever criteria you want for your blockchain, you can code that there. But you can do things that are much more interesting, like combining a federation with a Drivechain in some dynamic setup. For instance, in this example, I'm a kind of assigning 4 points of certain score to a federation signature so that I can choose between federation signatures or hashing power. So for instance, if I have 90% of hashing power of the network supporting this sidechain, then the federation is not needed anymore. But if this hashing rate goes below a certain security level, then the federation signatures matter. Okay, so I can even create some dynamic setting where I can accept both federation signatures and miner signals. Okay, and I think this is one of the few examples where a script uses the alternate stack of the Bitcoin virtual machine and the arithmetic opcodes. So how does this look like in a real example in the RSK blockchain if we manage to do this soft fork on Bitcoin? So these are all the checks and all the delays that take place during a transaction withdrawal in our network if we implement a Drivechain, so that you can see there are plenty of situations where you can actually do something about this if things are not going correct and there is malicious parties trying to disrupt this. So first of all, we have a user that commands withdrawal in the RSK sidechain. And the next step is this smart contract we call the bridge receives this command and forces a delay. So we have first a forced delay. All the blue squares are forced delays. So we have this forced delay of about, I don't remember, I think it's 100 blocks, where if any bug, anything with the technical network that is commanding a withdrawal that should not have taken place, the community could do something about it. So then the smart contract builds the transaction and commands the federation members to sign. Then the federation members are forced to sign. They are asked to sign, I would say, but they can do not do any other thing. And afterwards, this smart contract receives the signatures and has a new forced delay. And this new forced delay is to allow the miners, the Bitcoin miners, to be fully synchronized with the state of the sidechain. So then we have the Drivechain part. So in the Drivechain part, the miners will start this polling process where they will start putting these acknowledged signals in the Bitcoin block. And this will take about 2 days. During that time, it's possible that some miners detect that some other miners are completely malicious and they are trying to push a withdrawal of a fake transaction. If there is a federation, that's not possible, but if this is a pure Drivechain, it could be possible. So they can just ignore they could eventually ignore these malicious blocks. But if everything goes well and the number of acknowledged signals is over the threshold, then the transaction is approved. But still, we have this delay period of up to 90 days, 3 months, where eventually, the community could do a lot of things. So when that happens and the period expires, then the transaction can be actually included in a block. And then, if we use hardware security modules to create these transactions, to be able to only sign transactions that have certain conditions, then we can add a new forced delay. And this new forced delay is done with check sequence verify. So we have a time-locked transaction on the blockchain, which we could also have a covenant. So even if we get to that point and everything goes wrong, we could just reclaim the funds and put them back into the bridge, and as nothing had happened. So more deterrence to prevent any wrongdoing. And if everything goes right, we have the funds transfer enabled, and the user can use the funds. Okay. So all the timeouts are configurable for as a sidechain basis. So what's the rationale of these contacts opcode? So we had a lot of things to take into account to make this very, very efficient. So first of all, it's a very lightweight soft fork. It means that the whole soft fork is about 600 lines of code. It's very, very limited what we are proposing to Bitcoin. Second, it has full interoperability with the scripting system, so you can combine this with some other opcodes, or you can use this system to implement any other ideas that have no relation to sidechains. Also, it has zero risk of invalidating a block, and this is very important. So whatever you put in these tags, even if you put anything wrong, then the block would never be invalid, okay? So miners can accept these tags, can accept these signals from many sidechains. They can support many sidechains, and they do not need to be worried about attacks from a sidechain to them. So also very important is there's no additional computation or housekeeping to keep this system going. So it only is called, it only is executed when an actual withdrawal transaction is needed. And if it's not needed, there's nothing happening. So you can very easily segregate incentives. So you can make the sidechain pay for anything related to that sidechain. You don't need anything paid from the common good, you know. Also, there is no inherent change to the Bitcoin security model, apart from long-term incentives that could arise from, you know, just having sidechain in the first place. Maybe post-talk will talk more about these incentives in his talk. Also, we have very bounded computation for poll results, like the time it takes to scan all these block headers. It's very limited because we have a cache, so it's about the cost of 2 signature operations. So that would be the cost of the opcode. It has strong protection from denial of service attacks because we refer these transaction IDs as with only a prefix, and because to propose a transaction you have to give a pre-image of this transaction ID. The cost of spamming the blocks with invalid proposal is very high. You won't get the other miners to waste much resources. So, and also it has minimum space consumption on the blockchain. So all this, in a normal case, 288 signals from 2 days will take only 800 bytes. That's very few bytes. And second, it has zero risk of cross-chain invalidation, like one sidechain trying to put some tags that affect another sidechain. You cannot do that. Oh, and last, as I said, we have time to protective and reactive measures on the whole validation. So there is another proposal for a drive chain. I would like also you to review. It's very interesting. It's a post-talk proposal. And the main difference between two proposals is my proposal is stateless. It's very lightweight, while Paul's is more stateful. It has a database of everything that's happening on the sidechains. It's interesting, but I think the lightweight one it's better because it just takes very few bytes, to use, and also the number of lines of code that you have to change in Bitcoin it's much lower, and this is good for auditing and security. So there are the two sources of the two BIPs. And here's a reference implementation and the new BIP. I will, as soon as I get home, I will send this to the Bitcoin mailing list, the new proposal, so I can start discussing. And also there is a reference implementation. I think it only has some modification I need to make. So as a summary, you can create federated sidechains since long ago. RSK is one of these federation, the only one federated sidechain. I think it's active now, but you always have this possibility of the federator stealing the funds. So you can add this new layer of protection using hash rate escrow, and you can combine them with the federation, or you can have a pure hash rate escrow, and that will be much more decentralized. So you can create any hybrid, okay? So that's all. Thanks, everyone. I don't know if I have time for questions.
Hey, thanks for your talk. So the last time there was about the 90-day period, last time there was a dispute with miners and a soft fork trying to do something about that. That 90 days sounds very short, but would you lose all usability if it was, say, 3 years? Or
you can put any number there. The only thing that changed is the cache size. Currently, the cache it's about less than 1 megabyte. So if we multiply this by 10, it would be 10 megabytes. I don't care much about the period. I really think that in case that we have an explicit malicious action in the blockchain, like miners trying to steal, which is undisputable, maybe 3 months is more than enough, but we could make it 6 months if the community wants it. It's not it doesn't affect the computation because the poll is still restricted to 2 days, but the delay can be anything.
Right, but I imagine that the victim of the theft would be like one specific sidechain, so they'd have to like convince the rest of the Bitcoin community that their cause is worthy, et cetera, et cetera. So 3 months sounds like a very short time for that.
Okay, we can make it that 6, 9. It's up to the community to decide.
Hey, what incentive does the miner have to listen to the sidechain?
Okay, I think there are clearly two incentives. First of all, I think that any innovative sidechain brings value to Bitcoin. For instance, the RSK blockchain has a VM that is compatible with Ethereum, so we have a lot of Ethereum applications that are being ported to our platform and now run using Bitcoin as the currency. So that's one thing that just brings value. And the other thing is that because you can do merge mining as we do, then they are also incentivized to use to bring this network alive, to create more community for this network. So that's another incentive. And a third incentive could be just paying the miners, but I don't like that. I prefer them to be part of the network and do merge mining.
Sorry, with the merged mining, I get those smart bitcoins, which are not separate tokens, but which are essentially bitcoins, right?
Yeah, there is the same amount of tokens, smart bitcoins that are moving in the sidechain. The same amount of bitcoins are locked in a Bitcoin address. So there is no way we can create more. If it's not because of a bug, we cannot create more tokens than the amount that is locked.
Thanks.
In the case of a dispute where there is a sidechain that has to make its case to the community regarding malicious behavior.
Could you speak a little bit louder?
In the case of a malicious event occurring where funds are being stolen, and a sidechain has to make its case to the community, this would suggest a lower limit on the size of a sidechain that could reliably protect itself, because they have to be able to convince the entire community in Bitcoin, not just their sidechain, to take action.
I'm very sorry. I just heard this because of the half of the question. Maybe you can approach me later and we. Sorry, Kansur. Okay. Thank you very much.